Welcome Annie here for Brutus Monroe. Today we're going to create this fun rainbow card. So let's get started. The products I'll be using is the Radiant Rainbow stamp set. I'll be using the heart, the Enjoy Little Things sentiment, and some of these little stamps to create a little background strip. We'll be embossing, and I'll be using Gilded embossing powder, Cantaloupe, which is one of our newer colors, embossing powder, and Mint Julep, which is a discontinued one, but it came in the Mother's Day kit about a year or two ago, and some embossing ink. If you don't have the Mint Julep, you can of course use any other embossing powder you would like. I have a panel here that has leftover Chroma glaze in it in the rainbow colors. It's just pink, yellow, lime, teal, and purple, and it's left over from a different project I use. Some Raven cardstock and Not Your Mama's cardstock used for our card base, which is an A2 card, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I have some other components, a circle and a heart, a striped pattern paper, a piece of white Not Your Mama's card strip here, and that's going to be for what we're going to use our little images on, and another piece for our sentiment. I have a bigger piece that will be stamping our hearts and embossing them. So let's get started. I have my stick and stamp mat already in my Misty here, ready to go. All I have to do is remove the cover on it, the protective cover. So now the adhesive is exposed. Now before I get started, I'm going to put some anti-static powder on my panel. I do not want to do that on my stick and stamp mat because of course it will neutralize the stick, and we don't want that. So I'm going to just stamp and emboss 2 of the hearts here. I'm going to have 6 in total, although I do not use all 6, but I do 2 of each of the embossing powders. So I have my little heart set in there. I'm going to ink it up with the embossing ink, and I'll stamp it twice so I have nice, crisp, and really wet ink on our card here. And I'll start with the Cantaloupe, then I'll do the other 2 colors of embossing powder off screen. And I will also fussy cut these little hearts. There is a coordinating die set for the stamp set, but I unfortunately do not own it. I have to get my hands on it soon. So you do this one more time, inking it up. Once I have that all inked, I will remove this card panel from our stick and stamp mat. Just by curling the mat, it pops right off. I'll set my Misty to the side so I can emboss our 2 hearts. I have a little scratch paper right here I'm going to use underneath us. Pour the little embossing powder on it. Shake off the excess. There we go. And then I'll heat set this. Now to heat embossing powder, or you will need a heat tool. I have my heat tool ready to go. I heat from the back just to set the powder a little bit, and then on top. And you know your powder is set when it goes from that dull color to that shiny and smooth look. And that's what you want, a nice shiny and smooth. Then you know it's completely set. As you can see, it's set here. And I will continue, like I said, the other 2 off screen, and I will cut them. So here we are with our all of our hearts. We have 2 in the Gilded, 2 in the Mint Julep, and now 2 Cantaloupe hearts that we did on screen. So I will set all these little components to the side, and I'm going to create a little pattern like this, you know, alternating colors. So I'm going to set these to the side really quick, and we're going to stamp our little strip. And I'm trying to create a black and white pattern paper using all those little stamps that we have in our set. So I'm going to use our stick and stamp mat. I'm going to stick our little strip of Not Your Mama's cardstock onto it. I'm going to bring in my Raven detail ink and a small block, acrylic block to use for our stamps. And I'm going to alternate the images. So I'm going to stamp this starting from the top, and then I'll just kind of zigzag down. And it's okay to be going off of the strip, so not the full image. That creates the proper movement and a continuous pattern. I'll swap out my stamp and move on to the next one, doing the same thing, moving in that zigzag kind of pattern up and from the top to the bottom. I'm going to go switch out the stamp and move on to the next one. And I'm just going to continuously do this until I fill this little strip up. And I want a black and white pattern paper, so to speak, for this to go with the other diagonal striped pattern paper that I brought in from my stash. So I have, I think, 2 more stamps to go and we'll be done with this. I have the smaller cluster of circles. Put that in there. And then the last one is like a little squiggle. It has little dots and a little heart on it. It's really cute. That one I'll just go ahead and use as my last filler. Once I have this all set, we'll be ready to start building our card. And I think one more little one about there. Oh, a few more. I guess I was wrong. Okay, there we go. That's it. So now I'm going to go ahead and peel this off my stick and stamp mat. Same thing, curl the mat, not the paper. That way your paper stays nice and straight and your mat just pops right off. I'm going to use my matte cleaner. I'm going to spray this really quickly and clean it off with a paper towel because I don't want any of this ink moving on to anything else I'm going to do. I'll give it a good cleaning after we're done here. This is just a quick clean. Okay, so I'm going to grab that other little scrap that I have of that Not Your Mama's cardstock. That side is wet, so I'm going to find a spot that is dry so my cardstock will stick to it, and we're going to emboss our sentiment. I use a little anti-static powder on here, and I'm going to stick this to my mat. And I'll use our Raven Detail ink here only because it's easier for you to see what I'm doing, but either the embossing ink or your Raven Detail ink is perfect for embossing. Both stay wet a little bit because Raven ink stays wet for a few minutes or a little bit, so it's good enough for you to use for embossing. Okay, so I'm going to ink up my sentiment, which reads, "Enjoy the little things," which is one of my favorites. I'm always saying that, reminding my family and myself to enjoy the little things instead of worrying about everything. All right, so we're going to use the Gilded for this. Now for this card, I could have left it black and white because we're using black more as our accent, but I wanted to have more of that gold brought down. I know I have it in my hearts, but I wanted more of it on our card. So I sprinkled on the Gilded embossing powder. I'm going to heat set our sentiment. Once I have that, then we can proceed to make our card. So I'm going to give that a quick heat set. And there, it's all done. And then I'll set it aside to cool before I trim it all down. Because once you're done, it is warm to the touch. So, all right, so here are all our components for our card. So let's get started. I want to trim our little pieces, that little strip down. That's why you saw me move off camera really quick. It was a little wide on the end and I want it just a little bit narrower. All right, so I'm going to adhere our Chroma Glaze panel here to the Raven cardstock, but what I want to do is I'm going to use some tear tape on it because it's slightly warped because, you know, I had it sitting for a bit and I just want to make sure it stays on there flat. Normally I use Barely Art glue for putting my projects together, but putting that tear tape all around the edges will help minimize the warping. Okay, so I'm going to remove the backing, partial backing of my tear tape here just so that it helps me make sure I am centered on my panel here before I stick it all the way down. So I use that little half removal so now hold that in place, get everybody straightened out. Oh, it's stuck down really well. All right, so now I'm going to push it in place. Then I'll remove the rest of our backing here. Now that our panel's all set, I'm going to adhere those little paper strips. So I'm going to grab those here in a second. Here we go. Now this one's long. I just cut a longer piece, but I'm going to need to trim it down. So I'm going to grab my tiny trimmer here. And I know I want it a little bit trimmed off here. So I just did the old nail push down to measure. And I'm going to fishtail the ends. To fishtail, I just slice it towards the middle of the paper. And then from each corner up to that slice in the center. I'm going to do the same thing with my diagonal stripe paper. Now my diagonal stripe pattern paper is slightly longer than the pattern paper we made, and it's thinner. The one we made is about 1.25 inches or so, and the other one is about 1 inch in width, not in length. In length I didn't measure, sorry. But you just want 2 strips, you know, one wider, one thinner, and one longer than the other. So I'm going to adhere these to the card more towards the left, leaving a little edge of that rainbow showing through. Now I'm going to place, this is the area I'm going to place that circle that I've die cut, and I'm going to first adhere my hearts to them. So I'm trying to figure out my pattern here, moving it around. At first I was going to go mint, gold, cantaloupe, but then I changed my mind. I'm just going to do a quick placement to see how this will work, if it's giving me what I'm hoping for. I know I want to tuck that one there. There's the gold. And then it starts to look a little too crowded, so I'm not sure. So I move everything off. Fiddle, fiddle, fiddle. All right, so I come to the conclusion that this is what I want, but I'm going to build this off my card. And I know I'm going to use foam adhesive on the more colored hearts. So the mint one and the peach ones, well, not peach, cantaloupe, sorry, colored hearts. Now the gilded hearts, I will adhere straight to the circle. And what I'm trying to create here is a faux viewfinder. As you know, a viewfinder is a circle and it has a little squares with the images in it. But here I'm going to remove, instead of putting the little squares in there with images, I'm putting little hearts. So I'm going to make sure, that's why I'm going in that round circle kind of thing. So I started out by putting my first cantaloupe heart and then my gilded heart, and I'll repeat it with the mint, then the cantaloupe, no, the mint, and then the next gilded, and then another cantaloupe. I realized that my mint heart is way too high, so I need to bring it down a bit. And then I realized my cantaloupe heart is a little too high. I'm going to bring that down a bit. I'm going to have to use a little barely art glue here on top of my foam tape because it had already stuck down. And then finish it off with another cantaloupe heart. Now, once I have that the way I want it, I know I was going to place it here. I'll adjust, and then that's where my black heart will lay. So before I continue, excuse me. So I'm going to go ahead and adhere, excuse me, this circle to my panel here. And I'm putting that more towards our left, making any adjustments. And then I'll adhere our heart, a black heart here, which is made out of raven cardstock. And I'm going to use foam adhesive for the heart. For our panel here, I'm going to adhere it to our card base. I'm sorry I got off screen there. I was trying to make sure I was lined up. All right, so I'm going to put some foam adhesive on the back of our raven heart here. And I want that lifted up to be the same height as our cantaloupe and mint hearts. I'm going to remove the backing of our foam tape or foam tabs, and I'm going to adhere that right here to finish off our circle. Now I'm going to trim down our sentiment. So I'm going to bring in that little mini trimmer. I'm trying to decide where exactly I want it. So I'll bring in the mini trimmer. I'm trimming off. I'm sorry I'm slightly off screen here. It's hard to tell from where my camera's set up and where I'm at to make sure I stayed in screen. So I'm just basically trimming as close as possible to the actual sentiment. And then I will fishtail our end to kind of mimic that of the little stripes of paper that we have in the background. I moved it around a bit, and then I decided, oh yeah, I want this overlapping the two hearts. That's a good way to connect them. So trim it one last time. I'll fishtail the end here, and then I'll use some foam adhesive only on one end because the other parts that are touching the hearts will stay high because of the hearts. So let me clear everything extra out. I'll get some foam adhesive to place on the bottom portion of our sentiment there. And then I will add a little bit of Burley Art towards the top there just to make sure it stays on there. Remove the backing of our tabs. There's our Burley Art on the top. And then I'll connect it to those two hearts. And we still have that other fishtail sticking out from the bottom. So our card could be done here, but I want to add some finishing touches. So I'm going to bring in some black and gold gems. These are flat back gems. I put a gold one on our black heart. Then I'll put some black ones all the way around our circle here. So I'll put a little cluster of 3 down here at the left hand, a gold one on that black and white stripe of pattern paper, and then a gold and black one towards the top left. So I'm just going to adhere these using some Burley Art glue, and then I add one more little gem here, and our card is finished. You have all that shimmer and shine from the Chroma Glaze background and from the embossing powder from the Gilded, the Cantaloupe, and the Mint Julep. We used our Radiant Rainbow stamp set. We used our rainbow heart, all those little mini things, designs, and the sentiment that reads, "Enjoy the little things." Our embossing powder in Gilded, Cantaloupe, and Mint Julep. Our inks and embossing ink and Raven Detail ink. And of course, the Chroma Glaze that I had used on the panel before, I'll have listed in the description box below. Thank you for being here, and I hope you found some inspiration.